Hey everybody, and welcome to Diverse Perspectives Presents Black History Month's Books of the Week. So this week's books of the weeks are Yellow Wife by Sadeqa Johnson and My Seven Black Fathers by Will Jawando. Both of these books are perfect for Black History Month because of the content, because of all of the things that are discussed over the course of just reading through them and how they relate to the overall story and the legacy that is a part of Black History Month. During this time together, I will give you a breakdown of the books briefly, making sure not to spoil anything, but making sure that you really understand how engaging both of these texts are and how they will really change your perspective. They are not your average Black History Month text. And because I am so passionate about reading, I'm so passionate about literature and about the impact that it has on our knowledge base, right? It's all about intellectual growth. That's what Black History Month started as, is for us to gain knowledge about our history and our background, for Black people to share the amazing things that we've experienced, as well as to reflect on some of the things that we have struggled with and how we overcame those things, how they made us better. And I truly believe that knowledge is the key for forward movement, that we have to know where we've been in order for us to really understand where we're going. And a lot of people are lost and don't understand the answers that they need simply because they don't really understand the past that has informed their present. And so this is what this is all about. So as we move into this, please be sure to engage. Let me know how you feel. If there's something that you really are questioning, or that there are books that you love and really want to share, please do so, because this is all about us growing together. Okay, listen. Yellow Wife was so surprising to me as I read it, simply because I have read the slave narrative, fictional depiction of life as a slave, for sure. Been there, done that. We all have. We all, seen the movies. And at times you get so overwhelmed because it's just like, we're hearing this story again. Like, I've heard this story of struggle and all of the things that happened during this time. But this story takes an entirely different approach to what we've heard before. So the concept or the premise of this particular text is that we have our main character, Phoebe, who is a mulatto slave. And the story really follows her and her experiences as a mulatto woman who is just trying to navigate this institution of slavery that we all know was horrific. But there were so many things that were discussed here that I never thought about, and it really resonated with me because I really have an issue with, like, the colorism that happens in our community, right? And it started from slavery. You had this divide that was intentional between lighter skin or mulatto slaves and darker skinned slaves that were often considered to be field slaves. And the dynamics that happen between, like, a group of people that are all in the same boat but have been taught to hate each other simply because of differences in the way that they were perceived to be treated by these people in society that were referred to at the time as masters, right? And so you have masters and mistresses that created these dynamics between slaves to keep them divided in order for them not to work together. Well, when we take it even a step further and we kind of think about, for one, the psychological damage that happens, and then all of the extra stuff that gets, like, mixed in with these feelings and emotions and misconceptions on both sides, you get, like, this thunder cloud that nobody really wants to talk about or even can, like, successfully articulate because it just makes everybody uncomfortable. And even though we're still dealing with those things today, like there's still the comments about the light skins and the dark skins, and even sometimes people referring to each other as slave, house slave, or field slave, or whatever, which has always been extremely bothersome to me, especially as a lighter skinned female, having to feel the weight of that, and like the resentment and animosity towards me because of something that was completely outside of my control, has always been really interesting. But this story really kind of flips it on its head, because for the first time, in a lot of the slave narratives, it really talks about the experience of Phoebe as a house slave, and then goes on so far to talk about the status that she seems to gain because of her complexion, but how really it was just a refined type of um, oppression. Like, she was more oppressed in a lot of ways than a lot of people who were seen to be more um, or seem to have less freedom. It's very, very interesting. Like, a lot of this was really psychological when you really kind of think about it, because it kind of forced me as the reader to think about this perspective from a totally different lens that I've ever thought about it. And I loved how well written this story was. I loved how engaging it was. Like, I was literally wanting to keep reading just because I wanted to know like what was going to happen to Phoebe. And it played with my emotions at times, because I wanted the happy ending, right? I wanted like everything to just be like a fairy tale, and for her situation to just be like, oh yes, like she triumphed over this. And in some ways she does, but she does it in a way that I didn't expect, or that I wouldn't have, written it that way. However, as I was talking to someone else about this text, we both read it at the same time. Like, that's not real life. Like, real life doesn't just, everything doesn't just end with a bow and we're good. In real life, it gets a little messy, and sometimes things don't work out, and sometimes you don't know what's going to happen next, and you get frustrated sometimes. And I really thought that this emotional roller coaster at times that this book took me on as I read it, was very real, and it was very raw, and it was life. And um, you know, I felt in my mind like if I had existed way back when, I could have been Phoebe, right? And just what that thought of every stage of her being, a young woman, and her, growing up into womanhood, and what that meant for her, and what meant for her when she entered motherhood. Like, every phase of this, but every phase of this as an enslaved person, is really just a different type of experience. And it really got to the historical value of it as well. Johnson does a great job of like sprinkling in actual events that happened in history along with the fiction. I was just really, really engaged from start to finish, and it is one of my top picks for this month. I think that anybody who takes out the time to go on this journey with Johnson, as they read Yellow Wife, will really, really enjoy the ride. Hopefully you will take out the time to check it out, especially if you're a fiction person. And please let me know what you think, because I want to have these type of intellectual conversations, because I think that it's really important for us to consider like what a text like this, the impact it has, even on just changing the way that we view house slaves or mulatto women in slavery during this time period, and how a lot of the stereotypes that have been created around that are unfair, and how it's really easy for us to judge a situation when we're on the outside looking in. But what happens when you get an inside view of the type of experiences that really did happen during this time? So, again, check it out and let me know what you think. Will Jawando's My Seven Black Fathers is so powerful. I was crying in the first chapter. And the reason why this text in particular really hits home for me is because listening to this man talk about his experiences as a half Nigerian, half white, all the way brown child, male child in America, I connected in such a way, not because I am a brown man in America, because I am raising a brown son. And it hit, I mean, it was just like so heart wrenching to me to really start to think about what my child encounters in this America on a regular basis. There's one particular quote in here where Jawando talks about seeing himself as a problem because in every educational space he was in, he was a problem to his white teachers. And it really hit home because as he continued to talk about it, he talked about how you internalize that as a black man in America to start to really believe from childhood all the way up until adulthood, right? You're indoctrinated with the idea, the very concept that just your existence makes you a problem. What does that do for someone? And I am sure that there are plenty of you listening who've experienced this as well. My view as a female in America is that there have definitely been times when I absolutely understood that I was out of place in the spaces that I was in. That I struggled even as in adulthood at times with imposter syndrome, feeling like I shouldn't be in a space because it's not the space for me. Like I don't belong there. But to understand like that this root starts from, I mean, literally he's talking about experiences that he had when he was like 4 and 5 and 6 years old of feeling this way because he was his excitement and enthusiasm was marketed as disruption when that's what we want. I mean, we sit and talk as educators about students not being engaged, and then you have brown students sitting in desks and seats who are like coming out of their skin, waving their hands, trying to get your attention, and you would dare to think of them as a disruption instead of thinking of them as being excited about learning. And it happens every single day. And for this reason, this is one of my top picks because as an educator, we have got to do better. And even though that is not his primary purpose behind this particular text, there's so much to glean from that. Systemic racism impacts everyone, and it does start from a very young age. Our children of color, black and brown children in America, are being taught to assimilate to white standards because in our minds in society, and again, people of color do it to themselves as well. It's not just white teachers that are doing this to black students. Black teachers do it to black students as well because we know that they do have to survive in this society, right? But it does destroy a little bit of them each time they're told that their excitement, their cultural wealth that they bring to the table is inadequate for spaces that existed long before them. Spaces that, in a lot of cases, education is not willing to change to fit the children that are in their spaces. They want the children to change to fit outdated spaces. And that is an issue. And so, like, for that reason alone, that this was an engaging text for me. And I'm sure you can already see the passion that I feel behind it. But there was so much more to this. Just his explanation of like the role of black men in the black community for black children, and not just because of the stereotype that black men are not in homes, because he himself had a black male in his home, but the fact that it takes community in order to make a whole being. There are pieces of this and how powerful that is. And if we look back to the history, right, because this is Black History Month, and this is why we're talking about this, so we can make these connections, that originally Africa, if we go all the way back, is built off of this sense of community. So there was community there, and then we came here, and community happened within the slave dynamics, right? Slaves looked out for each other. There was this sense of community, because a lot of times you didn't know the black father, the absentee black father, originated from slavery, not because black men in slavery didn't want to raise their children. It was because black men in slavery were being sold off away from their families, because again, this was a business, and they were property. So from a business aspect, slave masters did not care about the concept of family. So we have to consider all of this when we're having these types of conversations, but how powerful it is that black boys, brown boys see black and brown men within their communities, that they see them being present, and they see them being men, taking care of their families, telling them, hey man, get yourself together. Then we see a lot of that when we think about these athletes, that the way that they draw to their coaches and the role that coaches have in their lives. But what happens when you're not an athlete? When you're an academic student who's just trying to do your thing, somebody needs to be in those spaces showing that. He also hits on this concept of representation, which we hear often, but a lot of people kind of take for granted, and how important it is. That needs to happen on a regular basis. Our black men need to see. Our black boys need to see black men in positions that are not just entertainment, that are not just sports, but actually out here doing things, changing the world, using their brains and their intellectual wealth to help to build the community. And Jawando is a great example of how all of the pieces of the puzzle, his 7 black fathers, is not referring to his mom being with a bunch of men. It is talking about the men in his life that influenced his growth so that he could get to where he is today, and how vital they were in his journey to get to the next level, and how we need to really understand this purpose and stop feeding into these stereotypes that are actually destroying our community and have been for a long time. Black History Month is about us understanding that all the people that came before us were here for us, so that we could grow, so that we could develop, so that we could be more and do more. And that is what makes this book so powerful. I hope that if you are a nonfiction person, which, listen, as you can see at this point, I will read anything. Because I love to gain knowledge, and I truly believe that happens through the things that we read, because it is constantly working our brains and we're soaking it up. And I know that it's not everybody else's style, but guess what? Every one of these books are also on Audible. If you need to hear it, honey, go listen to the book, because this is powerful stuff, and it is stuff that needs to be heard by all of us so that we can really start building towards a better future. I hope that you check it out. If you do, please let me know. I would love to also engage in conversation about this one, because there is a lot going on here, but it is all good stuff.